Dark Eldar. The fall of the Eldar. This process lasted for thousands of standard years, corresponding to the historical era that was mankind's dark age of technology, although when Slaanesh finally came into being, the results within the material universe were apocalyptic and sudden. As depravity riddled every aspect of Eldar society, the pleasure cults sought ever more violent thrills. Before long, the streets of Eldar cities ran with the blood. The elegant architecture of their palaces became battlegrounds as the Eldar preyed upon each other, reveling in the cruelest of crimes. Their insanity and tainted passions poured into the warp until it finally achieved critical mass. With an apocalyptic bellow that tore the heart out of the Eldar Empire, a new chaos god was born, Slaanesh, the Dark Prince of Excess. An almighty psychic shockwave scythed across the galaxy, destroying countless billions of Eldar souls as Slaanesh's birth cries echoed through the material realm. The souls of almost every Eldar were stripped from them in an instant and devoured by the newborn chaos god in a cataclysm of pain and terror. There were a few survivors. Most were driven mad, their minds trapped half in the real world and a half in the swirling insanity of the warp. A great warp rift was created in the material universe at the site of what had once been the epicenter of the Eldar civilization, encompassing almost the entire Eldar Empire and creating the Eye of Terror, thus marking the dawn of the era known to humanity as the Age of Strife. World after Eldar world had fallen into the warp, to later be known as the Crone Worlds. Slaanesh gorged itself upon the Eldar's horror and despair. Unstoppable in its ascendancy, the new god consumed the ancient deities of the Eldar Empire and scattered the psychic remains to the far corners of the Empyrean. The Eldar civilization was gone. All that was left of the Eldar race were the exodites of the farthest-flung maiden worlds, the craft world Eldar, who had traveled far enough to escape the aftershock of destruction caused by Slaanesh's birth and the formation of the Eye of Terror. And those adherents of the pleasure cults who were hidden in the sub-realms of the webway. Much of the webway was shattered into ruin by the fall of the Eldar, but unlike the craftword Eldar who fled the catastrophe in real space, those Eldar who had built their own jealously guarded empires in the webway remained physically unaffected by Slaanesh's birth. The echoes of the new god's apotheosis still resounded within them, but unlike the kin in real space, they had escaped destruction. In their arrogance, they did not end the quest for excess and decadent pleasure, not even for a momentary respite following the death of their empire. Repentance and atonement were meaningless concepts for people that no longer acknowledge any limits on their actions, regardless of the consequences. The change that was wrought upon those Eldar sealed within the webway was far more subtle. Rather than having the psychic essences, the souls, consumed in one great draught by Slaanesh, the souls slowly drained away into the warp, taken over time by she who thirsts. Rather than having the psychic essences, the souls, consumed in one great draught by Slaanesh, the souls slowly drained away into the warp, taken over time by she who thirsts. The Eldar hate and fear Slaanesh above all other things, for she was given life by their actions, and yet she waits hungrily to claim each and every one of them, now or later. Where the Eldar of the craft worlds learned to deny Slaanesh's hold upon them by using the mystical spirit stones, the infinity circuits and the philosophies of the Eldar paths to safeguard the souls from consumption by she who thirsts. The Eldar of the webway became exceptionally good at ensuring that other beings suffered in the place. As long as they steeped themselves in the most evil and savagely decadent acts, the Eldar of the webway found that the curse of Slaanesh upon their race could be avoided. The agony of others nourished the diminished souls and kept them vital and strong, filling the spare frames with unnaturally robust energies. Assuming that they could feed regularly enough upon the miseries of other intelligent beings, the Eldar of the webway became psychically immune to the passage of time. So it was that the Dark Eldar were born, a race of sadistic murderers and torturers who feed upon the suffering of others in order to prevent the slow death of their own immortal souls. 10,000 standard years later, in the 41st millennium of mankind, Slaanesh's thirst consumes them still. There truly is no escape, for the Dark Eldar have only exchanged a horrible but quick death for an eternity of infernal hunger and the infinite emptiness wrought by self-absorption. The Dark City. Commorragh was originally the greatest of the webway port cities, impossibly vast and able to transport a fleet to any of the most vital planets of the Eldar Empire by virtue of its many portals. Because of the access it granted to the far-flung corners of real space, this mighty metropolis was reckoned to be the most important location in the entire webway. It was too valuable to the Eldar as a whole to belong to any single aspect of their empire, so it existed outside the jurisdiction of the great Eldar councils of that time. Precisely because of its autonomy, the webway city-port quickly became a magnet for those that wished the deeds to remain hidden from prying eyes. The realm of Commorragh expanded unstoppably as wealth flowed across its borders. It spread outward into the void, consuming other webway port cities, private estates and sub-realms with each new expansion. Commorragh grew ever larger and more impressive as it fed on their plundered resources. Unseen, the dilettante lords who ruled Commorragh's spires and dens of vice grew in status alongside their adoptive city, initiating more and more of the Eldar into their shadowy creeds. Deep in the webway after the fall, the groups of pleasure cult survivors came together and laid the foundations of the vast new sub-realm that they named Commorragh, the Dark City, which was built on the foundation of the ancient Eldar port city within the webway of the same name that had lain outside the jurisdiction of all the Eldar authorities of their lost empire. As more and more Eldar survivors from other sub-realms in the webway began to arrive, they soon added their own regions to the new realm, slowly making it even larger and more heavily populated, until it became what it is today, a vast domain, an infernal city of suffering and death. To this day, the Dark Eldar raid and pillage the galaxy at large from their hidden sub-realms in the webway, sowing as much misery and destruction as possible and stealing away millions of captive slaves to their lairs within the Dark City to be exploited for their own horrible ends. They are experts in the techniques of torture as well as mental and physical degradation, as the longer a Dark Eldar can drag out the torture of a slave, the more psychic nourishment he can take from him or her. A Dark Eldar who has recently fed upon the suffering of others shines with a cold and startling aura of power, his physical form restored to beautiful, youthful perfection even as his soul rots within its pristine shell. A Dark Eldar who is not allowed to partake of such energies for long enough will become a physical shadow of his former beauty, desperately hunting for a taste of misery to stave off the gnawing thirst in the depths of his own withered soul. The Satellite Realms. If a traveler were somehow to breach Commorragh's runic wards, they would first bear witness to the Dark City's tributary realms shimmering and distorting around it. One minute these vassal domains glimmer in the distance, the next they loom so close that the palaces and minarets can be seen by the naked eye. To venture unheralded past these satellite realms is to invite destruction. Many large and territorial cabals of Dark Eldar reside within the twisted geometries, deadly pirate bands of pitiless warriors who live only to inflict pain on others and will suffer no intrusion on their realms. Worse things lurk in the crooked shadows or swoop swiftly and silently through the air above in their never-ending hunt for prey. These are the hidden domains in which the Dark Eldar enact their vile rites and devilish schemes. Their origins lie in the tumultuous times that preceded the fall. As the cults of excess began to thrive, their private realms in the webway flourished unseen until the largest of their number grew powerful enough to threaten Commorragh itself. However, over the course of its millennia-long history, Commorragh has subsumed all of the vassal domains it has not destroyed. Within the gilded corridors and flesh pits of the myriad sub-realms frolic those Eldar who engineered the fall of their own race, laughing still at the warnings of the craft world cousins. The rise of Asdrubaelvecht. Over the millennia, Camorra grew from its shrouded beginnings into a galactic nightmare. Its expansion was driven largely by the machinations of one being, Asdrubal Vect of the Cabal of the Black Heart, who rose from slavery to become the true overlord of the Dark City. 4,000 standard years after the fall of the Eldar, in the time that mankind calls the 35th millennium, Camorra underwent its greatest ordeal since its founding. The Dark City was to be subjected to a full-scale invasion by some of the Imperium's most elite warriors. This catastrophic battle saw the rule of the ancient Eldar noble houses of the city brought crashing down. They would be replaced by a city of Cabals under the rule of Overlord Asdrubal Vect, the architect of this time of strife. The Vect began his days as a slave. Yet through pure guile and murderous ambition, he eventually rose to become the leader of a militant organization that he named the Cabal of the Black Heart. By the time Vect had established this power base, he had been recognized by the Dark Eldar's true-born aristocracy as a genuine threat. The Cabal of the Black Heart was opposed at all turns by the most influential of High Camorra's noble houses, Exalian, Kralak, and Ilothian. So it was that Vect, ever the master of turning foe against a foe to his own advantage, concocted a plan to bring the fury of the Imperium of mankind to bear against his many enemies. So audacious was this scheme that, to the eyes of most, it would have seemed like a horrific gamble. This could not have been further from the truth. Every angle had been carefully considered, every necessary loyalty brought beyond any danger of doubt. Asdrubal Vect's plan to achieve ascendancy demonstrated that his mind was like some intricate and unstoppable clockwork machine. By the time the plan had run its course, millions had been ground between its merciless gears. Vect, meanwhile, elevated himself to a position of total supremacy, borne to unimaginable heights upon an ever-growing mountain of cooling corpses. The seeds of the Imperial Invasion were sown in the region of the galaxy called the Desertarian Gulf. This area of wilderness space was well known among the human starfarers of the Segmentum Tempestus for the number of spacecraft that had disappeared within its confines. General Imperial practice was to avoid it at all costs. Unknown to the Imperium, there existed a vast portal into a main arterial of the webway within Desertarian space, shielded by hollow fields that made it appear to be nothing more than a shimmer in the starlight, perhaps a result of gravitational lensing. Behind this portal lurked the pirate fleets of Camorra, waiting for unwary prey. The Dark Eldar's noble houses preyed upon Imperial shipping lanes only rarely in order to escape retribution, hence the missing ships were always considered acceptable losses or written off as bureaucratic errors of the administratum. Vect's first move was to increase the frequency of these piratical raids tenfold. He made it his cable's priority to capture every Imperial Navy warship and invade every human world within reach of the Desertarian portal. He tore apart the Imperial Guard regiments garrisoning the planets of the Desertarian system, devastated the fortifications and disappeared with his living bounty into the depths of the Dark City, leaving nothing but utter ruin in his wake. This campaign saw the Cabal of the Black Heart grow rich in plunder and souls, though Vect's detractors thought him a fool for antagonizing the massive Imperial war machine. With its usual ponderous bureaucratic slowness, the Imperium eventually reacted to the disappearances in the Desertarian Gulf. A strike cruiser belonging to the Salamanders chapter of the Adeptus Astartes was close enough to investigate. It was patrolling the edges of the Gulf in search of the sacred artifacts and relics of their primarch Vulcan. Captain Ficus of the Salamanders ordered his ship deeper into the Desertarian Gulf. After a short but violent exchange with Vect's Cabalite fleet, Ficus's strike cruiser Forge Hammer was crippled by haywire bombs and transported through the Desertarian portal into the heart of the Dark City. The furor that resulted from this audacious capture set the spires of High Camorra aflame with new intrigue. A Space Marine captain was a great prize indeed, for such an individual could withstand extreme and prolonged mental and physical torture before divulging his vital secrets about Imperial defense. Before long, Vect found his cables fleet in the desert area engulfed, dwarfed by the armada of the Archon Lord Exalion. The forge hammer, still rendered impotent by Vect's haywire field, was confiscated by Exalion, taken to High Commorragh and analyzed by a long dissection process. In his arrogance, Lord Exalion had not reckoned with the resourcefulness of the Space Marines trapped within the stricken strike cruiser. The ship's Vox communications network had been shorted out by the haywire field, but unknown to Exalion there remained a more pervasive method of communication available to the Astartes. Captain Ficus's close friend, the gifted librarian Hessian, had sent a psychic request for aid as soon as the starship's systems had been disabled. Hessian acted as a living beacon to the rest of the Salamanders chapter, a beacon now trapped within the spires of Exalion's realm in the Dark City. When Lord Exalion sent the elite of his warrior court to bring the Space Marines to his torture chambers, they were met with far sterner resistance than anticipated. The Dark Eldar found it easier to carve through the hull of the strike cruiser and gain entrance to its dark corridors, but overpowering the Space Marines proved impossible. Lit only by the flashes of bolt gun fire, a desperate battle took place within the hull of the forge hammer until Astartes and Dark Eldar blood had mingled upon its hull plates. Exalion was quick to realize that he had underestimated his victims. He returned the salvage rights for the Astartes starship to the Cabal of the Black Heart, appearing generous but actually intending to seize the Space Marines once the Black Heart had suffered the losses in taking him captive. Vect readily agreed, forming small strike forces of all those warriors in his cabal whom he suspected of disloyalty, and sent him to face the strike cruiser's defenders piecemeal. Vect's Cabalite warriors, triumphant on dozens of worlds, marched into the forge hammer without fear, but the battle lasted for days. Exalion was happy to let Vect drive his so-called cabal to destruction, believing the cable's Draken to be a fool for not attacking with all the force at his disposal in a single, massive assault. Vect played a waiting game, feeding the disloyal elements of his cabal to the guns of the Space Marines to buy time, and even employing Commorrite mercenaries with well-known ties to Exalion's court, all of whom were soon swallowed by the violence within the human strike cruiser. On the 16th day of the siege, the skies above High Commorragh suddenly broke open. The Salamanders chapter had received the coordinates that had led them to the beleaguered battle brothers from the librarian Hessian's psychic broadcasts. The Desiderian portal had mysteriously been left fully operational, its guards slain and its controls locked so that it could not be closed. The full fury of the Imperium of Man thundered from the crackling jade-colored webway portal directly above Archon Exalion's personal spire. Through it came starships bearing the heraldry of not only the Salamanders but also the badges of the Howling Griffins and the Silver Skulls chapters of Space Marines. 24 strike cruisers, each appearing like a chunk of Gothic architecture reshaped for war, hammered through the wide-open portal into the shadowy skies of the Dark City. At their heart was the great battle barge Vulcan's Wrath, an immense spacecraft with broadside batteries that could flatten whole cities. Its prow was a vast jutting ram that plowed straight into the spire where Exalion stood, crushing it like a hammer driven into a priceless sculpture. The Dark Eldar overcame the surprise quickly. From nearby Portshard came hundreds of exotic craft, each a needle-like splinter next to the slab-like Imperial vessels, but no less deadly for that. Void Raven bombers and razor-wing jet fighters careened out of the towering hangars like bats from a cave, descending in swarms to attack each Astartes strike cruiser. Though many were destroyed by the Imperial cruiser's broadsides, others systematically targeted the larger ship's guns with focused void lance fire and sustained hits from the disintegrator cannons. The Vulcan's Wrath was struck by thick blasts of electromagnetic force produced by Portshard's salvage spars, rendering the majority of its weapon systems useless. One by one, the Imperial ships' guns were silenced. But these were Space Marines, and they were nothing if not resourceful. Ejecting from each strike cruiser came drop pods, fired with such force that they were projectile weapons in their own right. The drop pods hurtled down, smashing through dark Eldar fighter craft and Camorrite star-scrapers alike, each containing a squad of Space Marines who deployed upon impact with their weapons blazing. They left pure ruin in their wake as priceless Eldar statues shattered and the spires of the Dark City fell. The Astartes' counterattack robbed the Dark Eldar of the initiative. Within only moments of the drop pod assault, the Space Marines had established a perimeter in the obsidian-paved streets of the Kralak Quarter. Though they took constant fire from Kabbalite warriors and scourges that flew through the dark skies above, Astartes' power armor proved to be an effective barrier to the Dark Eldar's splinter weaponry. Yet it was not long before more of the Dark City's denizens joined the fight, drawn to violence and death like sharks to blood. Mass swarms of skyboard-mounted Hellions and Reaver jet bikers swooped down to rake and tear at the Space Marines, who returned fire, literally, with the Promethium-fueled flamers. The half-demon mandrakes and raider transport loaded with Dark Eldar warriors assaulted the Space Marines with claws, knives and splinter pistols. Battle was joined from one side of High Camorra to the other and the streets seethed with violence. Entire sections of High Camorra burned as the invading Space Marines cut down or incinerated each new breed of horror that assaulted them. Word spread quickly through the dark city of the human invasion, and high up in the arenas, the gladiators of the witch cults mobilized for war. The Space Marines within the city were 500 strong, almost half the size of a full chapter, and they maintained a defensive perimeter throughout the Kralak Quarter. High Archon Kralak himself led a massed charge against the Astartes, intending to crush the invaders that were destroying his personal fiefdom. Yet Kralak's rampage was ultimately halted by a stray blast from a dark lance that vaporized him where he stood. As the Forge Hammer lay shackled by electromagnetic force high in the spears, the battle in the skies of the Dark City intensified. Ex-Alien's last command had been to destroy the captive human ship no matter the cost, for if mere humans recovered his prize, the Archon's authority and that of his fellow noble-born peers would be shattered forever. Flights of winged scourges armed with haywire blasters and heat lancers began to systematically destroy the captive ship, while a fleet of Ravager gunships forced the Space Marines who sought to rescue the vessel's battle brothers back into cover. Then, in a storm of light generated by the teleportation technology, Terminators from the Salamander's first company teleported directly onto the hull of the Forge Hammer and returned fire. The scourges were driven back and Captain Fika seized his chance. His men emerged from cover as a single force, sending a crack missile soaring into each of the 9 towering spars that held his craft captive with the beams of the electromagnetic force. Miraculously, each missile triggered a chain reaction of explosions, and the burning spars crashed down into the streets below. The librarian Hessian summoned a psychic storm of his own, a raging inferno in the shape of a flaming drake that tore the Ravager gunships out of the sky one by one. The Forge Hammer had been ravaged by the Dark Eldar assaults, but it was free at last from the Dark City's clutches. With a roar, the strike cruiser began to ascend into the sky and freedom. Far below, the Space Marines fighting in the Ex-Alien Quarter were completely encircled as the full weight of Camorra was pressed against them, and warriors from dozens of noble houses joined the defense of the city. Yet the Space Marines' objective had been achieved, for the Forge Hammer was free. A single curt comms signal was sent, and within mere moments, the main bulk of the Space Marines in the Dark City teleported away in a brief burst of light. Those that had been cut off from the main assault gave their lives to buy the Brethren time, or else were paralyzed by Dark Eldar hypertoxins and taken away to later fight and die as warrior slaves. Confusion reigned as the haywire fields that had shackled the Imperial spacecraft were disengaged one by one. The battle barge Vulcan's Wrath, now joined by the badly damaged Forge Hammer, fired its retros and disengaged itself from the ruins of what had been Archonzelian's pride. The vast starship's engine blast flattened spires and starscrapers alike before the Space Marines made their escape. The entire Astartes fleet then passed through the still yawning webway portal above High Camorra and escaped triumphantly into real space. In the aftermath of the Imperial Invasion, Camorra changed forever. The power vacuum left by the vanquished noble houses of High Camorra was quickly filled by Asdrubal Elvecht and his jubilant cabal of the Black Heart, who had proven the superiority to their rivals in the crucible of war. In the years that followed, Vecht played politics like a true Machiavellian master of intrigue, forever asserting the meritocracy of the Cabals over the ancient aristocracy of the Eldar noble houses. Into the yawning power vacuum stepped Asdrubal Elvecht and his cabal of the Black Heart. Eschewing all pretense at innocence, Vecht ensured that word of his machinations became public. All would know that to stand in the way of Asdrubal Elvecht meant certain death, and in the centuries that followed his grasp on power would inexorably tighten. So it was that the cabal of the Black Heart rose to ascendancy over the Dark City in place of the old nobility, and Archon Vext's new position as the supreme overlord of Camorra and the Dark Eldar race was sealed.